Welcome back to Horrifying Stories. A group of teenagers went on a holiday trip to a Norwegian archipelago, organized by the British Schools Exploring Society. Along one of the trails, the teens saw huge footprints, and there was no doubt about it, a polar bear was lurking around. This is their horrifying story. Viewer discretion is advised. Svalbard is a group of islands in Norway, located just between mainland Norway and the North Pole. This northern Arctic tundra is home to reindeers, Arctic foxes, and polar bears. On August 5, 2011, in the middle of their Arctic exploring adventure, organized by the British Schools Exploring Society or BSES, a group of teens and their trip leaders suddenly got awakened with horror. At around 7:30 in the morning, while the young explorers were sleeping soundly in their respective tents, that was pitched on a snow bridge close to Von Post Glacier, a polar bear emerged. It went directly to the camp, breaking past the perimeter fence the team had set up without their tripwire alarm system sounding off. The bear toppled down the fence, leaving the campers having no idea of the horrifying scene that was about to unfold. Within seconds, the hungry 24-year-old polar bear, extremely agitated and believed to be in severe tooth pain, quickly approached one of the tents in the camp. The bear shook the tent and ripped it open. 17-year-old Horatio Chapple, a student at Eton College, and 16-year-old Scott Bennell-Smith from Cornwall, and 17-year-old Patrick Flinders from Jersey, were inside the tent sleeping. They awoke at the intense shaking of their tent, thinking someone was just waking them up. To their surprise, it was the wild bear looking for prey to satisfy its hungry stomach. Wearing only his boxers during that time, Horatio was about to get up and escape from the bear, but the bear pounced on him and slammed him to the ground. Its wide and heavy paws pinned him down. The bear devoured his young prey, ripping and biting him on the head, face, and neck. Becoming more aggressive, seeing Scott and Patrick also in the tent, the huge bear smacked its giant paws at Scott, hitting his head and his back. Then it turned to Patrick and lashed out on his head, but Patrick was able to quickly curl up into a ball and took cover as he tried to protect his head from the bear. The rest of the camp awakened at the frantic screams of the ongoing chaos. 29-year-old Michael Reed, one of the trip leaders and one of the few adults in the group, grabbed their rifle and quickly went out of his tent. He saw the polar bear lashing out on one of the kids, which he believed to be Scott. Immediately, he fixed his eyes on his target, the bear, which was on top of a kid. He was not exactly sure by then if it was Horatio or Scott, but he was determined on just one thing: to shoot the bear and making sure not to hurt its innocent prey beneath. Michael cocked the rifle in his hand and carefully aimed at the bear. Pulling the trigger was never easy at all. With the bear at the height of its attack, the pressure was on him to make sure the bullet lands right on target. When he finally had the courage and confidence to pull the trigger, the rifle failed to fire. He tried it again and failed in all 4 or 5 attempts to fire the shot. The bullets just kept on falling to the ground. Instead of putting an end to their horrifying ordeal, his desperate shout of frustration caught the attention of the bear. By now, the bear shifted his attention on Michael and charged right at him. Michael shouted to other campers to quickly get the pen rounds, despite him knowing that the campers haven't been oriented on where those were actually kept. The pen rounds were risky to use in close range, but this was an extremely desperate situation. However, the bear quickly caught up on him, knocking him onto the ground and biting his head. At that instant, the only thought that ran through his mind was that the bear's eyes would have to be the most vulnerable part, so his reflexes made him poke his fingers into the bear's eyes in an attempt to gouge it out. Unfortunately, he failed in his attempt to paralyze the bear. The bear continued on with his rage and went on to his next prey, 27-year-old Andrew Ruck, also one of the trip leaders. He was in the same tent as Michael, and he saw with his own eyes how the bear pounced on his friend. He couldn't stand the sight, so he got out through the other side of the tent and started charging at the wild predator. Andrew screamed loud at the bear, and threw rocks on its face, hoping to deter the bear. But instead of sending the bear away, he only drew the bear's attention. In no time, the bear turned towards him and found himself on the ground, with the heavy bear on top of him. With its huge paws on his shoulder, Andrew came face to face with the raging bear. Its claws lashed his face before the bear started biting his head. The bear dragged him close to where Horatio can be found lying unconscious. After leaving Andrew, the bear went back for Horatio, who was under the collapsed tent. Half of his body was out of the tent. The bear walked right over the collapsed tent and began biting his head again. It lashed out on the already ripped face of Horatio, as if the initial attack was not enough. By this time, Michael was able to get back on his feet and was determined to stop the bear's rampage at once. He grabbed the rifle and picked up one of the rounds that fell to the ground in his first attempt. He loaded the rifle once again and aimed at the bear. This time, shots were fired and successfully landed on the bear, knocking it down and killing the bear. The whole camp was filled with relief. Finally, the bear was down and it could no longer harm more campers. Matthew Burke, one of the young explorers in the trip, recounted everything that he saw from his tent from the moment the screams woke him up. He first went to the other tents and tried to get his co-explorers to calm down. At some point during the height of the attack, when Michael shouted for the pen rounds, he tried to look for the rounds in their leader's tent. He almost had his own close encounter with the bear as well. Fortunately enough, the bear got distracted and he was able to escape from the bear's sharp claws. When the bear was finally knocked to the ground, Matthew quickly responded to Horatio's tent, and as soon as he saw him up close, he knew right away that they had tragically lost Horatio to the bear. In his very own words, he stated, "There was no sign. He wasn't making any sound, he wasn't moving, you could just kind of tell." Horatio succumbed to the multiple head and upper body injuries from the attack. Meanwhile, his fellow campers Scott and Patrick survived the ordeal. Scott sustained head and back injuries, while Patrick sustained a skull fracture. The two trip leaders, Michael and Andrew, also survived with multiple injuries from fighting off the bear. Horatio's family, especially his father, David, felt the BSES should be accountable for the life of Horatio. During a thorough investigation on the incident, it was found that the tripwire alarm system they used as perimeter fence was defective. Michael told investigators the system they were provided with was incomplete, prompting them to improvise when they were setting up camp. Instead of the usual rectangular-shaped perimeter fence, they set it up in a triangular shape, and because the brass fittings were missing, they had to use paper clips in attaching the trigger system. The rifle that the group has been provided with was also already old, dating as far back as World War II, which led to its failure to fire the first 4 shots. The first attempt could have been life-saving for Horatio. It has been noted that the 98K rifle had been stored where the safety catch disabled the gun's firing mechanism. Apparently, no one was also properly trained on how to use it, on top of the fact that the rifle was not easy to use. Andrew had also recounted to investigators that it was the group's decision not to assign a bear watch that night, and they agreed to rely on the alert system on their perimeter fence. He himself personally experienced being a bear watch when he was still 18 years old, back in one of the trips they had in 2002. He was still one of the young explorers during that time, and he dozed off into deep sleep, despite being assigned as the bear watch that night. For Michael and Andrew, not a single anti-bear system is 100% foolproof. The executive director of BSES, Lieutenant General Peter Pearson, said that the reason why the tripwire system did not send off an alarm was not because of the missing parts, but mainly because the bear hit and toppled down the post first instead of the wire. However, regardless of this, BSES committed to have a bear watch in their future expeditions to Svalbard, facilitate intensive rifle training moving forward, and provide a second rifle to every group. Despite these, Norwegian officials did not find BSES to be negligent under criminal law. Instead, they concluded that Horatio's death was a result of a series of unfortunate circumstances. The Chappells filed for an appeal, but the Norwegian prosecutors stood by the initial decision that there will be no criminal charges filed against BSES. BSES has eventually rebranded and is now known to be British Exploring. The Chappells still feel that BSES should have been made accountable for the loss of their son's life, claiming that they have been assured that various safety measures were in place to ensure the safety of their young explorers. The Chappells have paid a hefty amount for that trip, so they expected sophisticated equipment would have been set up to ensure everyone's safety. It turned out they were wrong in entrusting their son to BSES. The fascination and awe that the young explorers felt when they saw the huge set of footprints along one of the trails days prior was replaced with trauma and horror, as their holiday adventure ended up as a trip that was nothing short of horrifying. Thank you for making it this far. If you liked this video, do click the like button below, and subscribe to our channel for more of these horrifying stories. Let us know what you think about the story, we would love to hear from you. Again, thank you, and see you on the next one.